My name is Emily Kimber, 33 years old, and I never thought the deepest betrayal of my life would happen in a room filled with flowers, champagne, and family. She was my sister, and during her wedding vows, in front of everyone, she made a joke about my pain, about me, but I didn't break. I stood up, looked her in the eye, and said one sentence that changed everything. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about finding your voice, walking through heartbreak, and finally choosing yourself. If you've ever felt invisible around the people who were supposed to protect you, then you'll feel every second of this. So stay with me. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing. Because what happened at that wedding, no one saw coming. I stood in the back of the chapel, hands clenched around the program like it could protect me. My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure someone could hear it, even over the soft piano melody echoing off the stained glass. Everyone was turned toward the altar, admiring her. She looked flawless, ivory lace hugging every inch of her like it was sewn from the gods themselves. My sister, Amelia, always knew how to command a room. But it wasn't the beauty of the moment that made my throat tighten. It was the way she locked eyes with me and smirked. The smirk wasn't warm, it was calculated. A cruel glint that sent me tumbling straight back to every time she'd weaponized her charm to make me feel small. I had almost skipped the wedding, part of me knew better, but I showed up anyway. Because that's what the good sister does. She shows up, even when she's barely held together by pins and pride. I glanced around. The groom hadn't looked at me yet, which was both a blessing and a curse. I didn't want him to see me like this, teetering on the edge of coming undone. But I wanted him to see me. Not the version of me Amelia had paraded around, twisted and unrecognizable. I wanted the truth to peek through, even if just for a second. As the vows began, my breath caught. Amelia's voice was honey-coated, sweet and slow. Every sentence choreographed to perfection. And then she said it. She said my name. Right there in the middle of her vows. She laughed, light and breathy, and turned to the guests. When Emily said I wasn't cut out for marriage, I think she meant well, she teased. But don't worry, sis. I finally found someone who doesn't run from my intensity. There it was, polished poison, delivered in front of 200 guests, all dressed in their finest. Laughter rippled through the crowd. My chest tightened. I smiled, barely, because the cameras might catch me. But inside, something snapped clean in two. And for the first time, I saw her clearly, not as my sister, but as someone who enjoyed breaking me in public because she couldn't feel big enough in private. The groom turned, just slightly. His eyes met mine, and something in his expression changed. But let me rewind for a second. Because none of it, makes sense unless you know what happened 2 months earlier. I hadn't spoken to Amelia in over a year before the wedding invitation arrived. We'd had a falling out, a spectacular, full-throttle kind of fight that ends in words you can't take back. I remember the moment it happened. A rainy Tuesday in my apartment, where she accused me of stealing something she never truly had. A man she barely dated, a job she never applied for, a version of herself she couldn't become. Projection was her art form. And that night, she painted me as the villain so she didn't have to confront her own emptiness. I didn't even defend myself. Not really. I just stood there, absorbing every word, watching her eyes blaze with the kind of rage you don't fake. And then she left. Just like that. Door slammed. Silence. We didn't speak for 13 months, until I got the cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed in her signature looping script. I thought it was a peace offering, maybe an olive branch and tulle and peonies, but that was before I saw the guest list, before I saw who she was marrying. Nathan. The one person I never expected her to invite me to see, let alone as the man she'd marry. I sat on my kitchen floor for a full hour, just holding that envelope, trying to decide if this was a cruel prank or some cosmic mistake. But it was neither. It was deliberate. Amelia knew. She always knew. Nathan wasn't mine. Not officially. We were never together, but that doesn't mean he didn't matter. He was the one person who saw me when I was unraveling and didn't run. We met at a nonprofit fundraiser 2 years ago, both of us volunteers. We'd talk for hours after events, sitting on the curb with paper cups of wine, laughing about nothing. He once told me, "You carry pain like it's precious." And he said it without judgment, just clarity. He saw me, and I saw him too. But we never crossed the line. Not even when it felt like we were dancing on it. And then he vanished. 3 months later, Amelia posted a picture with him, and the caption, "Unexpected things bloom fast." I deleted Instagram that night. I don't know if she found him on purpose, or if he drifted toward her in the absence of clarity. Maybe he was hurt. Maybe he needed someone. Or maybe I was just easy to forget. But showing up to that wedding was never about him. It was about me. I needed to know I could stand there, look her in the eye, and not crumble. That I could hold my head up while she played her cruel little theater games and pretend I wasn't bleeding under the dress I'd picked 3 times before deciding it looked unbothered. So yes, when she said my name at the altar, turned my pain into a punchline, something inside me shattered. But I didn't leave. I stood up straighter. And that's when he looked at me. Nathan. And for the first time in over a year, I saw the flicker of truth in his eyes. Regret. I didn't expect it. Not after everything. Not after the silence. But there it was, raw and blinking behind his wedding smile. And then, something even stranger happened. Right before they exchanged rings, he paused. Just a heartbeat, barely a second. But enough. Enough to make Amelia's eyes narrow. Enough to make the air still. Enough to make me forget how to breathe. And in that one moment, I realized something I wasn't ready to face. This wedding wasn't what it seemed. And neither was he. Before the wedding, before the smirk, the vow, the silent crack in everything. I lived a quiet kind of life. Not dull, not empty, but intentional. I worked as a counselor at a women's shelter just off Troost Avenue in Kansas City. My days were long, filled with emotion, stories too heavy for most, and small victories that didn't make headlines. But they mattered. They were real. And for a long time, that was enough. I had my morning rituals. The French press I insisted on even though it took too long. The same corner booth at Gilda's Cafe where the barista knew my name and exactly how much oat milk I hated. The long walks home where I'd let the cold bite into me just to feel awake. It was a quiet life, yes. But it was mine. I lived alone in a small 3rd-floor apartment with creaky floors and too many plants. The windows faced west, and every evening, golden light spilled in and made the whole place look like it was forgiving. I liked it that way. My peace wasn't loud. It didn't throw parties or make Instagram reels. It just existed. But even then, I carried the weight of Amelia. She was the storm I never saw coming. Or maybe I did. Maybe I just kept telling myself the lightning would miss me. Growing up, people always said we were so close. And from the outside, it probably looked that way. Matching dresses at family functions, photos of us holding hands at the lake. But even then, I knew. Amelia didn't love me. She possessed me. Like a mirror she could drag around and twist when it suited her. If I did something good, she had to do it better. If I found something beautiful, she found a way to dull it in my hands. But I didn't hate her. That's the twisted part. Because when you grow up with someone who shifts between warmth and cruelty like it's nothing, you learn to love with one eye open. You tell yourself, that's just how she is. And you let the apology you never got become your responsibility to forgive anyway. My friends would notice, especially Layla, my best friend since college. She once told me, "Amelia treats you like a prop in her performance." I laughed it off then, but part of me knew she was right. It just hurt too much to name it. I think I always believed that one day Amelia would see me. Not as competition, not as a threat, just as her sister, as someone who would have done anything to protect her. But that's the assumption I carried into adulthood, that if I just loved her enough, she'd stop needing to hurt me. And I clung to it. Hard, even when it cracked me open, even when Nathan came into the picture. The first time I met him, it wasn't magical. It was awkward, actually. He spilled coffee on my sketchpad at a fundraiser I was helping coordinate. I hadn't even known he was a volunteer. He showed up late, disheveled, apologetic, and so clearly not the polished type Amelia usually gravitated toward. He made some self-deprecating joke about being underqualified but overcaffeinated, and I laughed. We spent the whole evening setting up tables, folding donation envelopes, and talking about things that mattered and things that didn't. He asked about the women at the shelter. I asked about his work in urban design. He told me he wanted to make cities feel like home again, not just livable, but lovable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not because he said anything grand or poetic, but because he listened. Like the world wasn't on fire. Like I mattered. We started seeing each other, not romantically, not officially, but consistently. It was slow, like walking into the ocean and not realizing how deep you've gotten until you can't feel the bottom anymore. He'd bring takeout to my apartment. We'd sit on my fire escape and talk for hours. He'd leave notes on my fridge. "Don't forget your umbrella." The world's a little softer when you're rested. Simple, kind things. Things I wasn't used to. He never kissed me. But the tension lived in the spaces between us. And I think he felt it too. But then Amelia came home. She had just ended her 4th engagement. She made a show of pretending to be unbothered, telling anyone who would listen that she'd dodged another bullet. But I could tell she was unraveling, the kind of unraveling that demands attention. I hadn't mentioned Nathan to her, not because I was hiding him, but because I knew how her mind worked. She didn't like things she didn't control. And Nathan, in all his quiet sincerity, would never bend the way she wanted him to. But somehow, they met. I still don't know how. She said they bumped into each other at a bookshop, that he helped her reach a copy of The Art of Stillness off a high shelf. The irony of that almost made me laugh. Within 2 weeks, they were dating. Or rather, she was announcing their outings, posting curated photos, tagging me with captions like, "Look what I found. Hope you don't mind sharing, sis." I remember staring at my phone, trying to understand what I was feeling. Rage, betrayal, or just confirmation. Like my worst fear had always been walking toward me, and I just kept pretending it wouldn't arrive. I confronted Nathan once, just once. It was late. He came to the shelter to drop off a donation box. I pulled him aside, into the hallway near the loading dock, where the fluorescent lights made everything feel too exposed. "You didn't even ask," I said. He looked down, then back up. I thought there was nothing to ask. I almost laughed, but the pain caught in my throat. We were something. Maybe not everything, but something. I didn't know what to do with that, he said softly. I didn't want to mess it up. So you handed it to her instead. He didn't answer, and I didn't cry. I just walked away. After that, I cut myself out of the story. I stopped checking her posts. I buried myself in work. I started going to the gym at 6 a.m. just to feel in control of something. I thought I was healing. But really, I was hiding. Because what do you do when the person you love gets handed to the person who breaks you? You grieve. And then you get dressed for their wedding. That was the life I had before the betrayal. A life built on helping others, even when I couldn't help myself. A life held together by hope that someday love wouldn't feel like punishment, and a belief a dangerous one, that family means loyalty. Even when it doesn't, the betrayal didn't hit all at once. That would have been merciful. No, it arrived in waves. Some subtle, others brutal. And the worst part was, I saw it coming and still let it tear me open. The truth unraveled in fragments. A text left open on a phone. A name I didn't expect on an RSVP. A conversation I overheard and pretended not to. But the final blow came one night when Layla, who had always been fiercely loyal to me, sent me a screenshot with no message attached. It was Amelia's latest post. A photo of her and Nathan in front of the Nelson Atkins Museum. She was wearing a red dress I'd once let her borrow. The one she said made her look too mature. He was in the suit I'd helped him pick out for a fundraiser. And the caption. When he said he needed clarity, I gave him direction. Clarity. The word hit like a slap. That was our word. Something we used to say when we couldn't name the emotions spilling between us. Something sacred, unspoken. That was when the denial shattered. Everything in me sank. My stomach turned to acid. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. I dropped my phone on the floor like it had betrayed me too. I sat there on the cold kitchen tile, knees to my chest, trying to remember how to exist. The betrayal wasn't just about Nathan. It was about my sister. Someone I'd grown up defending, even when she didn't deserve it. Someone I believed, deep down, still loved me in some twisted way. But love doesn't steal. Love doesn't twist the knife and smile while doing it. The emotional collapse came quietly at first. I didn't scream. I didn't break dishes or write angry letters. I disappeared. I stopped replying to texts. I missed work. I canceled plans. I let the mail pile up and the plants die. I couldn't stand the thought of people seeing me like that. Raw, wrecked, humiliated. So I went still. For a while, I existed in fragments. Wake up, stare at the ceiling, scroll, cry, sleep, repeat. I wasn't suicidal, but I wasn't really alive either. Just suspended. My body was there, but everything that made me felt stripped. The worst part was that nobody could tell. I still posted photos of coffee cups and sunrises. Still smiled when a coworker walked by. But inside, I was screaming. I was stuck in a memory loop I couldn't exit. I kept replaying every moment with Nathan, trying to pinpoint when he pulled away. Was it the night we sat in silence watching the snow fall? Was it the morning he lingered at the door but didn't say goodbye? Or was it me? Was I not enough? Not bold enough, not loud enough, not Amelia enough? That thought haunted me. Because deep down, I believed her. I believed her unspoken message. You're the one who lost him. Not me. Grief and rage lived in me like roommates I couldn't evict. Some days, I hated her so much I wanted to confront her, to ruin her the way she'd ruined me. Other days, I felt ashamed for even feeling hurt, as if my pain wasn't valid because we'd never officially dated, as if betrayal only counted if there were labels involved. But betrayal has its own language. It doesn't need paperwork. It needs history. And we had plenty of that. I tried to fight it at first, tried to be mature, to take the high road. But every time I scrolled past another post of them sipping champagne or hiking through Colorado, I felt something inside me rot. The final collapse came during a staff meeting at the shelter. We were talking about a new intake process, and someone asked my opinion. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat clenched, my vision blurred, and suddenly, I was sobbing in front of 10 coworkers. I left the room in silence, didn't explain, didn't go back. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were sunken, her posture curled inward, her skin pale. I reached up to wipe my tears and whispered, "Who are you?" And the answer was terrifying. I didn't know. I didn't know who I was without my loyalty to Amelia, without my unspoken thing with Nathan, Without the identity I'd wrapped around being the one who never caused drama, who stayed silent, who kept peace, I was unraveling, and that unraveling turned inward. I questioned everything: my job, my value, my boundaries, my worth. I wanted to burn the entire version of myself I had been and start over, but I didn't know how. So I spiraled. I called Layla in the middle of the night one evening. She picked up on the first ring. "I can't do this," I said. "I feel like I'm disappearing." She came over in 10 minutes flat. No makeup, slippers, hoodie. She didn't say anything at first, just held me. And in that moment, I remembered what it felt like to be seen without needing to perform. "You're not disappearing," she whispered. "You're shedding. But shedding hurts. Because it means letting go of the belief that being kind will save you. That being the bigger person earns you safety. That if you just love hard enough, people will stop hurting you." The internal war raged. One part of me wanted to call Amelia and scream, to ask her why she always needed to win. Another part wanted to disappear forever. And a third part, buried under all the noise, just wanted peace. But peace felt like a foreign language. And rage felt like fluency. So I did what I'd never done before. I started writing it all down: the memories, the hurt, the truths I'd swallowed. Every time Amelia had cut me with a compliment. Every time Nathan looked at me like I was his safe place, only to hand that safety to someone else. I wrote until my hand cramped. And in those pages, I found something I didn't expect. Clarity. Not closure. Not forgiveness. But clarity. I saw the patterns. The way I'd let silence become my strategy. The way I'd shrunk to avoid conflict. The way I'd made room for everyone else's chaos and called it love. No more. That night, I packed the RSVP card that had been sitting in my drawer for weeks. I checked attending. Not for her, not for him, but for me. Because sometimes, the only way to reclaim yourself is to walk into the fire and not burn. And I had a feeling their wedding would be nothing short of an inferno. After I mailed that RSVP, I thought I was turning a corner. That maybe taking control, showing up, choosing myself, would be the beginning of something stronger. But healing doesn't start with a declaration. It starts with a collapse you survive enough times to build from. And I wasn't done collapsing yet. I fell into what I now call the pretend healing phase. You know the one, where you buy new sheets, throw away the old mugs, sign up for hot yoga, and post cryptic quotes about growth, like their spiritual armor. I told people I was fine. I told myself I was moving on. But in truth, I was just moving in circles. Numb. Polished. Hollow. Isolation wrapped itself around me like a comfort blanket. I canceled on Layla more times than I want to admit. I stopped answering my mom's calls. She always took Amelia's side, even when she said she didn't. I didn't have it in me to hear her justifications. I needed space and silence. But silence is a dangerous place for someone who overthinks. I started making impulsive choices just to feel something. I went on 3 Bumble dates in a week. One guy told me I had quiet eyes, and I almost cried at the table. Another kept talking about his crypto portfolio until I excused myself to the restroom and never came back. I signed up for a half marathon, dropped out after week 2. I dyed my hair, then dyed it back. Nothing stuck. Because healing isn't found in distractions. It's found in what you're willing to sit with. And I wasn't ready to sit with any of it. I hit rock bottom on a Wednesday. It was raining. My heat had gone out. I was late to work. And when I finally made it to the shelter, I found out one of our residents, someone I'd grown close to, had relapsed and vanished. No call, no note, just gone. It gutted me. I sat on the bathroom floor of the shelter and cried so hard I gave myself a headache. I wasn't just crying for her. I was crying for every piece of myself I'd been pretending wasn't broken. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled therapists. Not the self-help blogs, not the Instagram coaches, a real therapist, someone I could talk to without having to perform. Her name was Dr. Nadia Ellis, warm voice, no-nonsense tone. Her office was in a brick building near Midtown, decorated with string lights and muted rugs that made everything feel less clinical. In our first session, I said, "I don't know how to stop carrying other people's damage." She just nodded and said, "Then let's figure out why you keep picking it up." And that cracked something open. We met every Tuesday afternoon. At first, I rambled. I wanted to sound healed, like I was there just to fine-tune. But she saw right through me. Therapy stripped me bare, slowly, painfully, beautifully. I talked about Amelia, about the years of rivalry disguised as sisterhood, about the manipulation, the jealousy, the twisted compliments that always landed like jabs. I talked about Nathan, how his silence hurt more than his choice, how he never gave me clarity, just absence. But the real breakthrough came when I stopped talking about them and started talking about me. Who was I without their narratives? What did I believe about love, about worth, about being chosen? That's when Nadia said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the cost of peace is the version of yourself that kept begging for it. So I made a decision. I cut off contact with Amelia completely. No texts, no silent stalking, no curiosity about her wedding planning. I blocked her on everything. I even deleted old voicemails I'd been saving, thinking maybe one day she'd be softer, kinder, human. That day wasn't coming. It felt like losing a limb. But also, like taking my first breath in months. Then came the twist, the cruel little hiccup the universe throws at you when it thinks you're getting too comfortable. Amelia emailed me. Emailed. Like we were strangers. The subject line, bridesmaid dress sizes, need ASAP. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of anything. Just a PDF with dress options and a passive-aggressive need-by-Friday note. I stared at the screen, mouth open. Was this a joke? A test? Some final insult to see if I'd still dance when she pulled the strings. For a moment, I felt that old reflex, the one that said, "Be the bigger person, keep the peace." But then I remembered what Nadia said, and I wrote back 2 words. "I'm not attending." And then I hit block. It should have felt empowering. And for a moment, it did. Until I found out what she did next. 2 days later, Layla called me in a rage. "She posted about you." "What?" "She said you were too emotionally unstable to be part of the bridal party, that she was disappointed but not surprised." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I felt humiliated. Again. But this time, it didn't break me. It burned. And that fire? It turned into fuel. I realized something vital that night. Amelia wasn't the villain. Not entirely. I was my own villain, too. Because I kept choosing to shrink, to swallow my voice, to avoid confrontation under the guise of being good, and being good had nearly destroyed me. So I started rebuilding. Not with declarations, but with choices. I got serious about therapy. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd drifted from during my self-imposed exile. I applied for a trauma counseling certification I'd been putting off for years. I stopped trying to make my pain pretty. I let it be ugly, honest, real. I created space in my apartment. Got rid of furniture that reminded me of nights I spent waiting for calls that never came. I changed the scent of my candles. I started reading again. Books with no romantic subplot, no redemptive arc, just women surviving. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I met June. She was a retired professor, volunteering at the shelter twice a week. She wore oversized sweaters and talked like a cross between Maya Angelou and someone's stubborn auntie. One day, I helped her carry boxes, and she said, "You walk like someone who just remembered she has wings." I laughed. "I feel more like I've been dragging a suitcase full of bricks." She smiled. Same thing. Wings take time to remember. June became my mentor without ever trying to be. We had tea on Thursdays and talked about everything from boundaries to betrayal to the difference between loneliness and solitude. She told me, "You don't owe anyone your silence, Emily. Especially not the ones who handed you pain and called it family." That stayed with me, so did her next words. "When you walk into that wedding, make sure you know why you're there. Not for revenge, not for answers, just for truth. Because truth is what I'd been denying myself. And it was time to stand in it. Even if it meant walking alone, even if it meant watching the people who broke me pretend they didn't, even if it meant looking beautiful in the face of a lie. Especially then. Transformation doesn't look like a movie montage. It's not cucumbers on your eyes and spinning in a flowy dress. It's quieter. It looks like doing the dishes when your heart feels heavy. Like sitting through therapy sessions that rip you open just to stitch you back together. It looks like calling yourself out when you want to fall back into old patterns. And slowly, over time, it starts to look like peace. The rebirth began with small rituals. Morning walks without my phone, journaling before bed, saying no and not explaining why. I started dressing for myself again, not for damage control. I wore bright colors. I wore perfume to the grocery store. I even got a tattoo, a tiny crescent moon on the inside of my wrist, a reminder that healing, like the moon, has phases. My apartment transformed with me. I painted the walls a warm terracotta, tossed the cold grays and sharp lines. I filled my shelves with books that made me feel expansive, lit candles that smelled like forests and firewood. I replaced my kitchen table, the one Nathan had once helped me build, with a new one I assembled myself. It wobbled slightly, but it was mine. Work changed too. I applied for the trauma counseling certification and got in. The coursework was intense, but it lit something in me I'd forgotten. Passion. Purpose. I was no longer just surviving. I was building something. Something sacred. One afternoon, a resident at the shelter pulled me aside and said, "You don't flinch anymore when people talk about pain. You listen like someone who lived through the storm and made it back with a map." That nearly made me cry, because she was right. I had lived through it. Not just the betrayal, but the decades of swallowing my voice, of overfunctioning, of making excuses for people who should have been protecting me. And now, I was done shrinking. I also started teaching a weekly workshop on emotional regulation. It was a mix of journaling, breathwork, and self-reflection. I didn't think anyone would show up, but they did. And one of them, a woman named Corinne, told me, "This is the first room I've ever felt safe crying in." That meant more than anything Amelia ever said. Then, as if the universe wanted to test my growth, something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Eli. He was a trauma-informed yoga instructor who came in to lead a session for the women at the shelter. Tall, soft-spoken, eyes like autumn. He was different, not flashy, not performative, just present. After the class, we struck up a conversation about the nervous system and attachment theory. Flirty, I know. But the way he listened, not like he was waiting for his turn to speak, but like he was genuinely curious, felt like oxygen. He didn't know anything about my past, about Nathan, about Amelia, and that was refreshing. I got to exist without context, without comparison. We went for coffee once, then twice, then more. He never asked me to explain my silence, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. One night, while we sat under string lights on the patio of a jazz cafe, he said, "You have this way of sitting in your truth without making it anyone else's burden." And I thought, maybe this is what love is supposed to feel like. Not like a game, not like a conquest, but like home. But I didn't jump. I didn't fall. I walked into it, one choice at a time, because this version of me doesn't lose herself in someone else's gravity. Still, the past hadn't fully let go of me. The wedding was weeks away, and though I'd blocked Amelia and ignored every attempt she made to stir the pot, The world had a way of keeping you updated whether you wanted it or not. Layla filled me in, gently, respectfully. The bridal party had ballooned to 15 people. There were horses involved. A private venue on a vineyard near Lake of the Ozarks. The theme, ethereal royalty. Of course. Apparently, Amelia had told everyone that I'd RSVP'd no because I was too emotionally overwhelmed to witness her joy. That part stung, not because it was true, but because it was such a polished lie. Still, I didn't react. I just kept going. Because growth isn't about getting louder. It's about knowing you don't owe anyone a performance. Instead of obsessing over her narrative, I focused on mine. I wrote, every morning, pages and pages. I made peace with solitude. I let myself feel proud again. I let myself feel beautiful again. And I let myself prepare, quietly, calmly, for the day I'd walk back into her world. Not as the sister she thought she broke, but as the woman she underestimated. I picked out my dress for the wedding with intention. Deep green, silk, off-shoulder, classic, understated, powerful. The kind of dress you wear when you've buried the past but still know exactly where the grave is. Eli offered to come with me. I declined. This is something I need to do alone, I told him. And he nodded, no questions asked, because he understood. The woman I was before would have shown up hoping for approval, hoping to be seen. The woman I am now, she shows up to see herself. There was still pain. I won't lie. Some mornings, I woke up from dreams where Nathan was apologizing, and I cried. Some nights, I still miss the idea of Amelia, the version of her I wished existed. But grief isn't linear. Healing isn't perfect. And growth doesn't mean the absence of sadness. It means the sadness doesn't control you anymore. I still walked. I still lit candles. I still went to therapy. I still said no when my body said no. And yes when my heart said yes. And on the night before the wedding, I sat by my window, moonlight touching the sill, and whispered a quiet promise to myself. No more pretending. No more shrinking. No more making myself palatable for people who feed on bitterness. I was ready. Not for war. Not for vengeance. But for truth. And something in my gut told me. Truth was about to walk into the room wearing a tux and a trembling smile. The vineyard was so perfect it made your teeth ache. Ivory tents billowed in the wind like sails, roses coiled around polished trellises, and the air was thick with string quartet music and curated joy. Guests milled around in jewel tones and rented confidence. Servers glided like whispers. Everything was designed to be unforgettable. And then there was me. I stepped out of the car slowly, adjusting the hem of my green silk dress. My heels touched gravel, and the crunch beneath my feet felt like thunder. Heads turned. I didn't look at anyone directly. I didn't need to. I didn't come to be seen. I came to see. Inside the reception hall, everything shimmered. Candles flickered in tall glass pillars. The chandeliers looked like frozen galaxies. And there she was, Amelia, at the center of it all, standing next to Nathan, laughing, twirling, owning the room like she always had. 1,000 eyes orbiting her, but his weren't. Nathan's eyes were scanning, searching. When they landed on me, something shifted, a beat of stillness, like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Amelia followed his gaze, and when she saw me, she froze. The smirk, her favorite weapon, faltered, just slightly. I walked past a row of guests toward the open-air patio, where golden hour was making everything look softer than it was. I needed space. Stillness. I didn't come to perform. I came to confront, not with rage, but with truth. I stood by the railing, facing the vineyard. A breeze tugged at the loose strands of hair around my face. And then I heard it. Soft footsteps on flagstone. I didn't turn. I knew it was her. She stood behind me in silence for a moment, then said, "You made it after all." I took a slow breath. "I was always going to come." "Funny," she said. "You seemed so fragile. I didn't think you'd have the strength." I turned to her. "Not all the way. Just enough for our eyes to meet." She looked stunning. She always did, but there was a tension in her face now, a tightness just beneath the surface, like a seam ready to split. "I'm not here for a scene, Emily," she said quickly. "This is my day." "I know," I replied, "and I have no intention of stealing it." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why are you here, after everything?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The dress, the crown of pearls, the practiced grace. And I saw it. The flicker of doubt. The quiet desperation underneath the gold. The fear that, somehow, I'd survived her cruelty and come out clearer than she ever thought possible. And then I said it. One line, calm, precise. "You don't know how to exist without hurting me, and that terrifies you." She blinked, just once, but in that blink, I saw it all collapse. Her defenses, her mask, the myth she'd built where she was the star and I was the shadow. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat, so I gave her the silence she never gave me. She stepped back slightly, suddenly unsure of her footing. "You always made me feel small," I said, voice steady, "even when I was the only one clapping for you." Her chin lifted, but her hands trembled. "You didn't have to take Nathan. You just needed to prove you could." That one landed. She looked away, toward the guests behind the glass, toward the life she curated so carefully, the applause she mistook for love. And then came the mirroring. I stepped into the light, just enough so she could see what I had become, not bitter, not broken, just free. And she saw it. Not the dress, not the posture. She saw herself, or what she could have been, if she had chosen truth over power, connection over control, healing over performance. I watched the realization unfold in her expression like a slow unraveling. "You think you're better than me now?" she asked, weakly. "No," I said softly. "I think I'm finally not afraid of you." We stood in the quiet for a long moment. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't need a mic drop. I didn't need a crowd, because power doesn't shout. It stands still. Nathan was waiting at the edge of the hall, looking like a man torn in two, regret written all over him. But I didn't stop. I passed him without breaking stride. And just before I reached the door, he called my name. "Emily." I paused, not turned, just paused. His voice was softer now, hesitant. "I never stopped thinking about you." I closed my eyes for half a second. Let that wound open, just wide enough to remind me of its cost. Then I turned my head, just enough to say, "Then you should have stayed when it mattered." And with that, I stepped out into the golden light. Free. The next morning, the world was quiet. No text messages, no gossip, no new drama to untangle, just sunlight slipping through linen curtains, birds singing outside my apartment window, and the smell of coffee steeping in my old French press. I wrapped myself in a sweater and stepped out onto the fire escape. The city stretched out beneath me, calm, indifferent. There was something comforting in that. Life hadn't paused for anyone's betrayal. Not mine. Not Amelia's, and certainly not Nathan's. I sat with that stillness. It wasn't numbness this time. It was presence. There's a certain kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, the kind that arrives quietly, like an old friend slipping into the seat beside you without a word. That's what I felt. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just release. I brewed a second cup of coffee and pulled out the journal I'd filled for months. Pages heavy with pain, rage, grief, memories I wanted to forget but needed to name. I flipped to the last page, took a breath, and began writing again. Not a letter to anyone, just to myself. You are not broken. You are not the aftermath. You are the whole damn story. I paused and smiled. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the one I built on my own, and finally opened the box of old keepsakes I'd tucked away after the betrayal. Cards, photos, a few of Nathan's old notes, even Amelia's childhood bracelet I'd been holding onto for years. I lit a candle, one with a scent that reminded me of firewood and clean slates, and gently, reverently, let each item go. Not with anger, with grace. I kept only one thing, a photo of me as a little girl, sitting on the front steps of our old house, arms around a dog we rescued. I looked fearless in that picture. Not because I didn't know what was coming, but because I hadn't yet forgotten who I was. I framed it and placed it by the door, so I would see her every time I left, and remind myself of what I was walking toward. 1 week later, I returned to the shelter for a workshop. The women greeted me with warm smiles, hugs, and stories about what they'd been working on while I was away. One of them, a quiet young woman named Bree, handed me a folded piece of paper. "I wrote a poem," she said shyly, "because of that thing you said once about how silence doesn't mean surrender." I unfolded it slowly, eyes skimming the careful handwriting. The last line read, "She didn't speak, but somehow the room still listened." I looked up, my throat tight, and whispered, "That's beautiful." Because it was. Because it was true. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped shouting my pain and started living my truth. And the world noticed. On the walk home that night, I ran into Eli. He was coming out of a bookstore, a stack of worn novels in one hand, reusable cup in the other. He smiled. "Hey, stranger," I smiled back. "Hey, you." We walked together, slowly, side by side, no rush to fill the silence. Eventually, he said, "You looked powerful that night." "At the wedding?" I glanced over at him. I didn't feel powerful, I just felt done. "Sometimes," he said. "That's when we're strongest, when we stop performing." We reached my building. He handed me one of the books, a poetry collection I'd mentioned weeks ago. "No pressure," he said. "Just, if you feel like reading something that doesn't ask anything of you." I thanked him. He kissed my cheek, and then he walked away. No promises, no wait, just presence. I went upstairs, made tea, and sat by the window with the book in my lap. The city shimmered under the soft blue of night. A few pages in, I found a line that made me still. She learned that peace wasn't something she found. It was something she returned to. And that's exactly what I was doing. Returning. Not to what was, but to what had always been waiting underneath the pain. The version of me who didn't need permission. The one who didn't need to be chosen to know she was worthy. The one who knew that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Somewhere in my drawer is a wedding program. I kept it, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that closure doesn't come wrapped in bows. It comes in the quiet moments, when you realize the war you've been fighting was never with someone else. It was with the part of you that kept waiting to be loved by people incapable of love. And now I love me. Fully, fiercely, without condition. That's the real ending. No fireworks, no final blow. Just a woman standing tall in her own life, unapologetic, and finally, free.